welcome to What's Next. I'm your host, Emma Arnold, and I'm very excited today because I have an amazing person with me. Terry Blas you're a writer, you're a comic book artist, and also we went to high school together, which is super wild. I think I was so happy you got a hold of me when you contacted me and you were like, hey, I saw you doing cool stuff. I'm doing cool stuff too. And I was like, yay, look at us. That's so awesome.
We have to find each other, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Did you go to our reunion? Either of them?
Oh my God.
Because we are that old that we had a 20-year reunion.
We are that old. Yeah. I went to the 10-year. I wasn't going to, but I lived right by Bora. I lived right by where we went to school. And a friend of mine was like, you're going. I'm dragging you. You're going. You're not going to, it's in your backyard. You're not going to not go. And I went, and it was weird because there was 22 people there. And we had a big graduating class, but they did a bad job organizing it and there was no one there. Wow. And then for the 20-year, I was in Alaska for some shows. So I was like, man, I'm not coming.
I know, right? That's all right. I mean, this is no tea, I guess, but I mean, I love kids. My mom ran a daycare for a long time. I think kids are cool. But when they asked what, we wanted to do for our reunion and everybody was like, a barbecue in the park with all of our kids. I was like, yeah. If I'm going to be around people from high school, I need to be very drunk.
For sure. I know. I was like, no, I want everybody to get hammered and I want there to be drama. That's what I want. I basically
spent my entire life watching Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, expecting something like that.
Yes. Yeah. I was ready. That's kind of what I was ready for, even though I had gone to the 10-year because the 10-year got kind of botched. So I was ready to go to the 20-year. And, but partly because I had just found out that there was all that drama in the Facebook page about me. And I was like, oh, really? So I was ready to go and be, scandalizing.
Which is funny because that drama had nothing to even do with you. It was that person. Yeah. It's whatever. But, your listeners are going to be like, what? But my resistance comes from mostly I don't know if you know this, Emma, but there are a lot of Mormons in Boise, Idaho. And I was raised Mormon. And I know that if I go, I'm just going to have to suffer through the whole oh, I knew you were gay. It's yeah, really? Me too. You could have told me something. You're taking me to a Broadway show. Fuck you. Or the idea that oh, but you were Mormon and now you're not, so you've left the church. And I'm that stuff is so far out of my life, which is, I mean, I guess we're either very much the same or very different people than we were in high school. I don't know.
It's kind of both for me. I went on a couple dates with someone from high school who contacted me, who is still Mormon, by the way, asked me out and was like, we're both divorced. I'd love to take you out. And I was like, you can, but I just think that you're not understanding, how this will go.
We have a very different idea of what date means.
Yeah, and exactly. And we went out twice. We had a nice time. He was a lovely man, very sweet, but he, before marriage doesn't do more than hand holding. And I was like, that's not going to work for me.
Was he like, so it's going to be a group date?
I think only because I'm not a Mormon, he didn't do that. Okay. But it was kind of a nice, I dated nothing but Mormons in high school, basically. Right. So it was kind of a fun little throwback to have somebody who was desperately horny for you but won't touch you. I was like, I love it. Yeah. I missed it.
You're like, this is what it was like. I remember now.
Yeah. Please touch me. Yeah. It's Mormon boys, I think I have a soft spot in that way because they know about consent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they are every step of the way with them is okay, I can put my hand on your boob over clothes, but never under. They're a whole list of things that they're allowed to do. So, yeah.
And then only sex when it's both consensual because you're married.
Because you're married and the Lord is there. So
and now it's okay to do whatever you want. Sure. Yeah. I don't know. When I come back to Boise now, I usually go back every year. I mean, not this year, obviously, but I usually go back every year for a convention that they have at the library, which is really fun. It's really cool. But Boise does not feel, in some ways it does, but it doesn't really feel like the same city we grew up in.
No, it's really, really different.
Yeah, it's grown a lot.
Even in the last couple of years, it's gotten so different that it's kind of none, even the cute stuff that made it lovable and livable is kind of gone. Now it's just Buffalo Wild Wings. It's just a strip mall, honestly.
Yeah.
But I do want to just real quick, I want to talk about when I kind of breezed over it, like, you're not just like, when I'm like, oh, you're a comic book artist, you're like a very accomplished, you drew for Amazing World of Gumball. Did you do the cover for Regular Show? Is that what I read?
I did 2 covers for Regular Show. My first published comics work was a cover for Adventure Time. Yeah. And that sort of led to other covers with the same company because...
the battery's low on the computer. Sorry,
you're
go
fine.
ahead.
Because Boom Studios in LA, they have like the rights to produce comic book tie-ins of a lot of Cartoon Network stuff. So that led to me doing several covers for them, and then I knew them and was able to pitch a book to them. My second book was published with them, and my first one was published by Oni Press. They made Scott Pilgrim. Mm-hmm. And that's because like they're here in Portland, and when I moved here, I got to know a lot of people, and I feel like there's so many comic book artists and writers in Portland, and I feel like when it rains 6-7 months of the year, it's conducive to like sitting inside and drawing and writing all day. So so I've done some books, and I had
I bought Dead Weight for my kids, and nice. I loved it too. It's such a fun book. And do you want to tell us real quick?
Oh, sure. Dead Weight was. I actually pitched a different idea for a book to Oni Press, and they were like, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll like put it on the table, read, and we'll think about it. And then my editor was like, we could put another idea up. Do you have anything else? And I was like, well, I have this idea, but I haven't developed it yet. And it's just a murder mystery set at a fat camp. And she was like, that's amazing. Write that up. So in 2 days, I wrote like a pitch for it. And they were like, yeah, let's do that one. This is some tea, but I wanted to call it Morbid Obesity. Because I thought that tells you everything that this is going to be. And they went with Dead Weight, which is kind of like the light version of that, I guess. But basically, it's about a young Latina who is plus size and she wants to design clothes. So she wants to go to like a summer fashion program, and her parents force her to go to like fat camp instead. And there's a group, there's like a bunch of kids there, and some of them they're all there for different reasons. Some of them really want to lose weight. Some of them like don't give a shit about that. And she ends up in the middle of the night, sort of being followed by a boy that she likes. It's not creepy. He sees that she dropped something and wants to give it to her. But they both witness a murder, like someone getting stabbed in the woods. And because of some clues they have, they believe that it's one of the counselors, so they can't trust the adults. So they need to get the help of a couple other kids and solve the mystery for themselves. But
it's a lot of fun. And am I remembering right that you said you went to fat camp?
No.
You didn't. Okay. You went on a mission. That's what I'm thinking of.
Very different kind of torture.
Very different kind of camp.
I went to scout camp when I was a kid. So
okay.
Because Mormon. No, but I was a missionary too. What I find funny, we don't need to get into it, but what I find funny is that after my mission, it's just something that I knew I was expected to do, and my brother didn't go on one. So like, there was, my dad was like, you're going to bring shame to this family if you don't go. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this, Mulan? And so like I went, but after I went back to Boise, I bought a car and I drove straight to LA, and I never went to church again.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, I'm
done.
And I knew
that was it.
I knew that was the first adult decision in my life I could make, that when, like, if I did a mission, I would be done. I could buy a car. I could move wherever I want. And I drove very far away, because then I didn't have to do what somebody else was telling me to do. So
you knew before the mission, you knew you were done. It was just kind of something you were doing for your parents.
I knew when you and I were like singing songs in choir in like ninth grade, 10th grade. Yeah. I was like, this is not for me. And so I made a little comic about it and put it on the internet. But I feel like growing up Mexican American in Boise, Idaho. My mom is from my mom is straight up Aztec Indian from Mexico, like little village outside of Mexico City. And my dad is from Idaho. And so I identify as bicultural, biracial, because my mom's like DNA is Native American. I guess. I mean, I don't claim Native Americanhood, whatever, but I claim Latino as part of my identity. But I feel like I didn't really get discriminated against for being Latino, but I saw that happen to my mom in Boise. And so I felt like when in church in Idaho, they were saying that like the homosexual lifestyle is a sinful choice. That to me was like, that's not a choice. And it was because I didn't choose who my parents were. like not in a negative way, but I didn't have a choice to be born, you know, bicultural, Mexican, American, whatever. So I was like, a choice is when you like wake up and you're like, I think waffles or oatmeal. Like that's a choice, you know? And so that told me at a very young age that I was like, this is not, these are fairy tales. This like Book of Mormon thing, this is not real to me. And I just was in the sunken place, I guess, for like, you know, 21 years waiting to be done. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, it's funny. I totally get what you mean about not wanting to go to the high school reunion and have to put up with the like, I knew you were gay. It's like you were active in theater and
like,
choir,
congratulations.
And
we all did.
Yeah, wow, great sleuthing. Yeah. You know, I can see why you'd be.
But I think also to say that to someone is like sort of rude because they were probably trying very hard, even though it was obvious, to hide this thing about themselves that, if you could see that it was obvious, great. But they're trying so hard to like blend in and not, you know, cause any waves, I guess. Well,
and I think probably half the people who say it to you are saying it in a like, I accepted you at that time. And the other half are definitely not. They're like, I knew you were gay. You know, like knowing our high school, I'm just doing the math on that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have so much gossip to get into later.
When COVID's over, we should have our own high school reunion in like Vegas.
Oh, I would love that. That's amazing. We could invite, there's like 5 people I still talk to.
That's exactly, I was thinking this morning that when knowing I was going to talk to, is like, how many people from high school do I talk to? And it's about 4 or 5. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not like super regularly. Right. And, you know, but like just people I'm like, yeah, we went to high school together and they turned out okay.
Have you met someone... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, have you come across anyone in the years since that was like, Emma, we went to high school together, and you're like, who the F are you?
Yeah, that happens to me quite a bit, and I feel like we had a really large graduating class. Like, people will come to shows and be like, well, we went to high school together, and I'll be like, really?
Yeah.
Huh. And it's not like, you know, it's not like I was like, you know, some popular cheerleader kid who was just like oblivious of everybody. I just like didn't go to class a ton.
No, I remember at our rehearsal for graduation, this is going to be a very interesting high school episode, Emma. I remember at our rehearsal for graduation, a girl sat down next to me and her name was like Allison Green. And I was like, hi, nice to meet you. Like I'd never seen her before.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had a really big class. So yeah, that does happen where I've like, don't remember people or they're so much different than I remember, you know, that I'm like, oh, I guess I had this total different idea of you, you know?
It's also like, it's the only thing that makes me nervous about doing that comic show in Boise is that I'm standing at a table with like a huge banner behind me that says my name, like, you know, 10 feet tall. And then someone comes up, Terry, hi. And I'm like, I do not know this person. And they're like, we went to high school together. I'm like, cool. Like, I'm like, oh yeah. Like, how much do you fake it?
Oh, a lot. Well, and that's, you know, I meet so many people a lot of times, like a lot of times I just have to kind of be like, oh my gosh, hi, how are you? And then later I'm like, I'll tell Alex, I'm like, no idea. I have no idea.
You run to your yearbook. You're like, who?
Who? Yeah, the yearbook. That's one of the things people pretty often bring up with me because I don't know if you remember that my senior picture is...
I'm picturing big hair.
It's big. It's really big hair.
And I think you also took senior... I don't want to embarrass you, but I think you took
please.
I think you took senior pictures in like a dance outfit. Did you not?
Yes. Okay. It had a belly dancing outfit.
That's right.
And I don't know if you remember, I had belly danced for the whole school at an assembly and also for choir several times. I did it for our exhibition things. Yeah.
Our assemblies were so weird because it was... Do you remember like the guys would get up and drag a lot for our assemblies?
Lot. I feel like that is a very Mormon
skit
trait. Like you could,
like thing. Like, let's do our skits. Yeah.
And they're like, it's just jokes. It's not a thing. I just like to wear women's clothing. It's not a thing. And you're like, now looking back, I'm like, I feel like a lot of those guys had a lot to express. You know, that was like the only way.
Sure. One of those guys is like, welcome to the stage, RuPaul's Drag Race season 13.
Yeah. Keep waiting. Yeah. Well, let's get into it because I'm so interested to hear your answers to these questions. So the first question is, you can answer it how I sometimes prep people. I haven't been prepping people anymore because I feel like it's almost better to get like an off the cuff question. But what's the closest you've ever come to dying? Like, have you had any near death experiences? What's the closest you've ever come?
I've been very lucky, so I haven't had like a bunch of those. One thing comes to mind, and it's really freaky. And when I was a missionary, and that was in New York City, and it was during 9/11. And the reason I mention that is because at the time, I was sort of like, when you're a missionary, you have like, you're always with someone else. It's called your companion. And I had just gotten a new companion who was like a brand new missionary. So I was the one in charge, kind of. And on our day off that week, we were allowed to go do things in the city every once in a while, if like they would allow that. And I asked him what he wanted to do that week. Like, where do you want to go? And he was like, oh, I want to go to the World Trade Center. And I was like, okay. So we planned to go do that. September 12th.
Wow.
Yeah, and then September 11th happened. And I was
wow.
Wait, is that right? Yeah, September 11th. And I was like, it's not there anymore. we can't go. So by one day,
yeah,
I missed that. And that always feels really weird to me.
Yeah.
Other than that, I had a surgery a few years ago, and I remember I was kind of scared to be put under. As like, am I going to wake up? Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like a lot of people have that, like, okay, I'm going to come out on the other side, but am I? Like, it's kind of a weird feeling. I definitely called my sister and was like, okay, I love you. Like, before the surgery. So
that's a scary way to go, too, because, like, you're sort of, like, going to sleep, picturing waking up and being fine, and then it's like you don't get a chance to do any goodbyes or, you know, it's like being hit by a bus. You're just like, you don't get any chance to be like, wait.
Right.
Hang on, you know.
I have unfinished business, and now I'm a ghost.
Well, it's my second question then, and I'm interested about your answer since we kind of talked a little about this before, because obviously your belief system has changed pretty drastically in your life. So what are your beliefs? Like, let's kind of do a then and now. What are your beliefs about the afterlife, and how have they changed over the years?
So, like, growing up, I was always told that the afterlife was like, you can be with your family forever, for eternity. And I was like, my family can't stand to be in the same room for more than 10 minutes together. So that does not sound fun. And Mormons believe in like 3 levels of heaven. And like, if you're super good, I guess you go to the top one. And then if you're just kind of good, you know, you go to the middle one and so forth. That's the image of the afterlife I had. And then, of course, like people in white robes and like you're the perfect version of yourself or whatever. Because I'd been told that ever since I had been born. And over time, I have come to, I mean, I'm atheist. I'm like, I don't believe in any of that crap. Like, I just don't. And something kind of, I made a documentary a few years ago where I said in it that I'm not a spiritual person. I don't consider myself religious or spiritual. But I don't, like, I think a lot of people balk at that. They want to say like, oh, but I'm spiritual. And that's fine if you have your own, you know, whatever sense of spirituality. But this woman came up to me after and she was like, you probably feel okay being that way because you are fulfilled in other ways, like creatively or artistically or whatever. So that sort of became this like, yeah, I don't believe in religion or the afterlife. I think that when you die, you die. Sorry, Buddhists. Like, but I think that like that's what happens now. I don't believe in an afterlife, which I find really funny because I'm super obsessed with Day of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And that's when, you know, like if you don't know, it's November 1st and 2nd. It's like a Mexican holiday where you make an altar, you put up photos of your family. Everybody's seen Coco now. Like they get it. But I mean, I don't really believe that, like, if I put out orange flowers, the spirits of my grandparents are gonna, like, be able to find their way to me. But it's just a nice way, I think, for me to, like, remember people that are no longer with us and to make the holiday sort of what I want it to be. But, like, the older I get, the more, like, connections I have familially. Like, it's taken a long time for my parents who are super Mormon, to sort of not care that I'm gay. Like, I'm sure they still do. But last year was the first year they ever visited me and my husband. They had Thanksgiving dinner with us, and it was a bizarre but good experience. So now that, like, now that like things are better with my family and that I have people that I love, I understand why people are like, no, but I need to see this person again. Like they were my whole world. They were my whole life. So I don't know, like it's very wishy-washy with me, but I do think that I prefer to believe, like, I think that when you die, you die. And the fact that I'm going to die makes the life that I live more meaningful. Like, if you're going to live forever, then so what? Mm-hmm. Like, who cares? And so I'm rambling now.
No, I think that's a really, I almost brought it up earlier. Like when you say, you know, you're really fulfilled in your life now, I think that it seems like a lot of times the people who are living lives right now where they feel deeply fulfilled are less concerned about like the afterlife and not, you know, not living toward that. And like, and maybe because you have to.
I also don't like a system in which you do good things because you feel you will be rewarded for them later in some religious way. You should just be a good person. Like,
do you think, did your mom, did you guys celebrate Day of the Dead when you were a kid with your mom?
This is funny. No. Oh. And I started celebrating it on my own years ago. But I called up my mom and the whole conversation was in Spanish. But I was like, Mom, you didn't celebrate Day of the Dead growing up, did you? And she's like, eso es una cosa católica. So she like said, that's a Catholic thing. And I was like, okay, but I know plenty of Mexicans who aren't Catholic that like celebrate this. And she's like, that's because we like to party. I was like, okay. But my mom is like, I don't like skeletons. And I'm like, you're like the only Mexican woman I've ever met who thinks skeletons are weird. But yeah, but that's how Mormon my mom is. So she was like, nope, I'm good. But she loves all the food associated with it. And you know, she has her own ways of remembering her family and whatnot. But yeah, I didn't celebrate that growing up. And so I find that was interesting that to me, I like a few years ago was like, no, I want to make my own connections to my culture. Like growing up, when we would go to Mexico to visit family, everything was seen through the lens. I hate to take it here again, but everything was seen through the lens of Mormonism. Mm-hmm. So like everybody we saw and talked with was Mormon. Like
so your mom's family was Mormon in Mexico. Yeah. So it wasn't just her and she sort of broke away. It was like your whole family. Really interesting.
So my dad was a missionary in the 70s and he went to Mexico and he met my mom there. My mom had just come back from her mission because she was a missionary too.
Wow.
And so her whole family was Mormon. A lot of people assume that my dad converted my mom and whatever. But yeah, they got married and she flew to the States and 7-8 years later, I was born.
Wow. So the whole family down there is already Mormon. Yep. You go to visit. Mm-hmm. And that's got to be a very different experience.
So like a year or two ago, I'm really bad with time. I think it's 2 years ago. It was very important for me to go to Mexico as an adult, not religious, gay man with my husband and experience Mexico City my own way. I was like, can I go eat places I want to go eat? Can I go to the museums, please? Can I go to a bar? Like, I just want to, that's a part of me that I felt like I hadn't been able to like latch onto in the way that, like, imagine you're like part of this amazing culture, but like people are keeping it from you.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's bullshit. Like, I need that. So,
yeah. So when you were a kid and you would visit, you did Mormon stuff. You didn't go to the museums. You didn't go.
Yep. We would go visit my grandparents and then we'd go visit the church. We'd go see the Mormon temple. We would talk with family. I mean, we would do fun things too, but like, none of it was ever like, we're going to go spend the day at the museum and look at Mexican history. And when we did, we would go to the pyramids at Teotihuacan, the Aztec pyramids. And that was through the lens of Mormonism. My dad would be like, so see, there's 3 temples, like the 3 levels of heaven. So there's the sun, the moon, and the stars. And I'm like, they were not Mormon. Aztecs were not Mormon. So like, part of the reason that I found you again was because I was involved with a show where they asked me to do stand-up comedy and I was terrified, but all of it was about Mormonism. And I framed it within like, these are the craziest things that Mormons believe. And one of them was like, that like Mexicans are Jews who left Israel by boat and came to Central America and had their skin cursed darker by God because of their exceeding wickedness. Like,
wow.
And I'm like, that's the shit that like I was always told my whole life. And I'm like, modern science definitely tells you there was no culture there at the time that the Book of Mormon talks about that was called Lamanite, it was called Nephite. Like, don't tell that to Mormons; they'll just get really mad. But
how do you sort of process that? Did you ever process? Did you even think about it as a kid, being like, I'm half Mexican? They say that Mexicans were cursed. Like, did you ever put that together as a kid?
Yeah, the thing is that this is going to be so weird. That's such a weird episode. But within the Book of Mormon, there are times when the darker skinned people were more righteous than so it's like, so you can frame it any way you want as like, well, but they were righteous too. So despite their cursed skin.
And one thing I've always admired about Mormonism, because I wasn't raised Mormon, obviously, but
You're so familiar with it.
But yeah, I grew up here and all my friends were Mormon. I went to church all the time with them and I went to Wednesdays, I did the whole thing. All the boys I dated were Mormon. So it's like I ended up with half the like weird sexual hangups, thanks to Mormonism. Like, I feel like I'm sort of Mormon adjacent. And one thing I've always admired about Mormonism objectively is like, Chip, okay, are you leaving now? All right. I got to get my old dog out of here. He's like, I'm done with this podcast. Is that they left this sort of interesting wiggle room where they're like, well, the prophet now says the new whoever's prophet at the time can sort of just rewrite. They're like, we're not doing that anymore. The prophet says we're not doing this anymore. And that lets it sort of keep being like, changeable. When
the gospel is not supposed to ever change, why would you change it if was God not as intelligent a few years ago? And so like that's what I tell people who don't really fully understand that, like, so I'm very passionate about the fact that people need to know that the highest suicide rate in the country is amongst Mormon teenagers in Salt Lake City who identify as queer.
Really?
And nobody is talking about how a church or an organization that runs, 90% of what happens in that state might be responsible. In fact, the state of Utah released the statements attributing the high suicide rate in Utah to the high elevation.
Wow.
And I'm like, so you're telling me that exclusively teenagers who exclusively are Mormon and exclusively identify as queer have trouble breathing because it's so high up there? Like, give me a break. So what I find, it's crazy. I'm going off on like a tangent, but like, I totally forgot why I was telling you this. Oh, because of the changeable prophet stuff.
Yeah.
But what people don't understand is that like so many people are like, well, I'm going to stay within the church and I'm going to change it from within and be a good example. And I'm like, okay, if Leah Remini said like, I'm going to be the best Scientologist there is and I'm going to use all the power of Xenu to change the church from the inside, we would think she's nuts. Mm-hmm. So why is that okay for Mormonism? And the thing that bothers me is that people don't understand that a church that big, a church, people say like Scientology, they net so much money every year. It's thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands. And I'm like, the Mormon church nets 5 times what they do in a year. Mm-hmm. And churches only change when threatened with the loss of money. So back in the 60s and 70s, when the Mormon church wasn't letting black people have black men have what they called a priesthood, the president of the United States told the prophet of the Mormon church, I am going to take away your tax-exempt status as a church if you don't change this. And suddenly the prophet received this divine revelation from God that, we are supposed to allow everyone to. Same thing happened, previous to this, when the president of the church said, I'm going to take your tax-exempt status away if you continue to practice polygamy. Suddenly a divine revelation came from God that, and so I don't think that divine revelation is coming for gay people in the church, because that flies in the face of their entire religious reasoning for the church, because you are here to have spirit babies for Jesus. Mm-hmm. So that revelation is not coming.
how are they going to reckon with that? Yeah. To be like, okay, except for 10% of you who are here to be aunts and uncles.
Right, exactly. There's a very well-known musician who is Mormon, not gay. And he says that he's this LGBTQ like advocate and ally. And he said something about like, I have to focus on my community though. And like meaning Mormonism, not meaning queer people. And, you know, I can't just like walk away from like a burning building. And I wrote this piece that basically said, listen, if you're on a fast moving train and you're running in the opposite direction, you're still going where the train wants you to go. And the first thing someone tells you, if you're in a burning building, is get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will end up burned or dead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's his analogy is terrible.
Yeah.
You're like, no, that's actually the opposite.
I'm like, take it from a writer. Your analogy sucks. Here's why, and here's a better one. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that about teenagers in Salt Lake, but I just know, even in our own experience, you know, I didn't know you were gay in high school, but I've known a lot of people since who have left the church or who I know are still in the church and pretty deeply unhappy. Like, I'll tell you the name later, but
sure.
A woman that we went to high school with asked me to go out to lunch, and she's still in the church, and we went out to lunch and we were talking and stuff, and we started talking about Mormonism, and I was like, I don't care that you're still Mormon. I'm not trying to like, I'm not trying to unconvert you or whatever. I'm just like curious about your experience because you are, you know, you're a feminist and you do work in the LGBT community. And I was like, I just am curious, like how you're like doing that math in your head. And she started crying.
Oh man.
And she was just kind of like, it was like part processing of like, I could tell it's like almost like a spiel, you know, a spiel is like
that she had been told to
that she was saying out loud, but at the same time she was like emotional, and she kind of kept saying, but also I don't know, because like I obviously don't agree that women can't have the priesthood, and I obviously don't agree with a lot of this stuff. And I was like, it made me really grateful to have not been raised with something that like fundamentally goes against my own belief system. You know,
I was asked to speak at this convention for like queer Mormons and queer ex-Mormons. Up front, I was like, I am not a member of this church. And they were like, that's fine. And I said, you know, I won't tell anybody like what to do if you want me to come talk, but I will be honest about who I am and what I think. And they were like, that's fine. And this kid came up to me afterwards and he asked me, how do you not fight with your family about Mormonism and gay issues, et cetera, every day? And what I told him was, I said, I don't fight with my family every day. And he was like, what? And I was like, I don't live near my family. And he was like, oh. And I said, I don't think that moving solves all your problems. But what I want you to know is that most of the world does not know what Mormonism is, and they don't care.
Yeah.
And you live in Utah, and this is your entire world.
Yeah.
I was like, if you don't want to fight, you don't fight. My parents are Mormon. My sister is Mormon. I love them dearly. But Sarah Silverman said something that I thought was great. I only really like female comedians. Sorry about it, but they're like the best ones. I don't give a shit about guy comedians. I really don't. Like I grew up on had to hide it, but on a like steady diet of Margaret Cho.
Oh yes, Margaret's wonderful.
But Sarah Silverman said in this show that she made, like, there's a difference between the liars and the lied to. And I try to remember that. Like, obviously I feel like the Mormon church, the higher ups there, they know that this shit is not real. They're liars. And they're lying to people who believe it. So, I don't know. I didn't expect it to be so Mormon heavy. I'm sorry I took it there.
No, I don't know why you're sorry. I think, you know, each person I talk to has had such a different and interesting personal experience. And like, you know, obviously that's going to be a huge part of your story since that's who you were for 21 years.
In thinking about how that relates to the afterlife, I do think I should tell you this because it's kind of interesting. My father's also like a retired colonel. He's a military man.
Oh.
But he's never been like, yes, sir, no, sir. You know, he's a very loving, kind person who just wants you to like him. And, you know, he's like a dad, like a dad joke dad. And after I came out, it was maybe like a year or two after, my mom was still really struggling with it. And I remember I was working at IKEA at the time, and I was on a break, and I was sitting in the stairwell, like, of the employee area. And my dad said, you know, your mom just has a really hard time because now she feels like in the afterlife, for all eternity, she's lost you, and she's not going to have you, and we're not going to be an eternal family, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, you guys don't really believe that. And he was like, what? Of course we do. Like, almost as an attack on his religion. And I said, then answer me something. If you love me, or if mom loves me, and you think you're going to lose me, then you guys certainly aren't making the most of the time you have with me, because right now you guys treat me like shit.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And my dad, who has never admitted that he's been wrong about anything, because it's just his personality,
yeah,
the only time in my life I've ever heard him say, I think you're right.
Wow. That's a very powerful point.
I was like, yeah, like, if you think you're not going to have me in the afterlife you believe in, like, does that take precedent? Like, are you just going to, like, throw me away now? Or are you going to make the most of the time you have with me, that you think you have with me?
Well, that's the interesting thing about Mormon heaven that's always intrigued me is, like, so, because that's the other thing that they do that I think is really funny is they're like, it's fine, we'll just baptize you after you're dead. You know, it's like...
They got in so much trouble for baptizing, like, Anne Frank and a bunch of Jewish people.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, sorry, we won't do the Jews. Jeesh.
All right. I know, right?
But I think, like, even that sort of, like, so it's interesting because you have these three levels of heaven, and there's not really a hell in Mormonism. Is that right? Like, it's like the worst heaven.
They call it outer darkness. And
my gosh.
And the only way you go to outer darkness is if you were someone who was Mormon, accepted Jesus, and then later were like, no, I don't want anything to do with this.
Really? So if you leave, so murderers still go to second heaven?
Right. But me, I'll be straight up in outer darkness, descending a staircase with a big martini, a devil with horns. Every gay person you've ever, thought of in your life, we'll all be down there hanging out.
And outer darkness is just what? It's like it's just oblivion?
Like, yeah, it's just like dark, and it's like a little while ago when California and Oregon were on fire and you couldn't see like 20 feet in front of you. It's like that.
It's like that. Yeah. Okay. So, and then middle heaven is just kind of like earth? Like it's not great, it's
celestial,
fine.
Celestial and terrestrial are what they call them. And they always said that if you get to be someone who goes to the celestial kingdom, like the very top one, you can travel to the other two, but someone who's in the very bottom one can't travel up.
Oh, so your parents could come visit you in outer darkness.
They could come. I mean, well, outer darkness isn't considered one of those three.
Oh, it's not. Okay, so it's like a fourth.
Yeah,
okay.
It's like that's their hell.
Okay, that's their hell.
Yeah.
And then you have the three levels of heaven.
Yep.
Wow, and that's... Man, what a club to use against people who want to leave the church. Like, well, the only people who go to hell, literally the only people are people who leave Mormonism. That's got to be terrifying a bit.
As if I'm a worse person than like a serial killer or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Who just is going to accept Mormonism when the ghosts tell him about it in the afterlife. Like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Am I not remembering? Don't you also get your own planet?
Yeah, so you like, I mean, if you're a guy, sorry, ladies.
That's right. That's right.
Because then you can like get your own planet. You basically become, they think of it like a cycle. So they think God used to be a man like us and that he got his own planet, and that the story of that planet is that, his son Jesus was like, I will go and save your children, and et cetera, et cetera. So you as a man will get your own planet, and you will, rule that with your wife and create children and et cetera, for like, to go down to your earth, I guess. Yeah.
Oh my God, that sounds exhausting.
I know. I'm like, I can barely...
So I have to do this life and then I have to go be God and be in charge, or I don't, because I'm a woman, obviously. Right. But if I was a man, I would have to go and then be in charge of a whole planet.
And I'm like, no, thank you.
That's
I can barely take care of my dog.
I remember, so I almost converted when I was about 12.
Oh, wow.
Because my family was pretty fractured, and we moved to Boise when I was 9, and then all my friends after that I hung out with a lot of Mormon kids. And when in my neighborhood, it was pretty rough, and a lot of the kids were foster kids and stuff. But then when I go to my Mormon friends' houses, on the other side of the school, they had everything was clean, and their mom cooked all the time, and their parents were really nice, and everybody was really pleasant. Nobody cussed at each other, and I was like, this is dope. And actually, I started going to church because a friend of mine was like, you can't come over anymore. My mom says you can't come over anymore unless you come to church with us. And I was like, okay. So I started. Right. Yeah. So I started going to church, and I remember the exact moment because I was like, I had been to other churches. My parents thought it was groovy to go to other people's churches. We went to stuff.
Yeah.
And my biological father's side of the family is Pentecostal. So I had a little bit of experience with religion. But I remember sitting there at one point after having gone for a couple years and being like, yeah, and they were talking about getting me baptized. I may have even gotten baptized. I can't remember if we got that far, but I feel we were very close to this point of me getting baptized. And I remember there was this moment where they were talking about, if you're here on earth, you were one of the people who fought on the right side of heaven. That means you were one of the people. And so we all got a sucker. And I was like, I love this religion. It's amazing. Yeah. You get suckers. We're here because we're already angels. Incredible. And then that was when they started in on talking about your husband will get his own planet, and you get to go with him, but you have to obey.
And you're like,
and even as I was like, oh, I'm sorry. What? And the teacher explained it to me 3 times, and I remember just putting the sucker down and being like, I'm sorry, I've wasted everybody's time. This isn't
I don't
for
need
me.
this piece of candy.
I don't. Keep your dum-dum, okay? Right. I'm going to have autonomy.
My memories of church are so bizarre because, I feel like if you were, if you were straight and white, it's very seductive to you. Like you said, you would go to their houses and they'd be beautifully decorated and large, and it seemed peaceful there, and Mormons like to sweep a lot of things under the rug, so you never know what's brewing under the surface. But my experience was boys in the Mormon church do scouts, or they did when I was growing up. I don't think they do anymore. And the young women do the young women's program, which is basically baking and watching Disney movies, right? That sounded amazing to me. I was like, Rice Krispie treats and Aladdin, let's go. That's awesome. And the guys who were supposed to be doing scouts would always be playing basketball. And I was just like, this is BS. I can't, I don't care about sports. And so I would show up and the scoutmaster would be like, Terry, we're all playing basketball right now. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'm drawing pictures in my sketchbook. I already did this merit badge that you say we're going to get to in an hour, and I got it at home. So, I'm going to go hang out with the girls. They're making brownies. I don't know what to tell you. I was always seen as just a weirdo.
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever.
Yeah, I went to Girl Scouts a few times, but it was in a small town, so it wasn't here the Girl Scouts are pretty cool in Boise. My stepdaughter was a Girl Scout, and I was always like, I wish I had been like this. But when I went, they talked about obeying your husband, and we learned how to we learned how to. The only thing we ever did was one time the boys got to go on a hike, and they got to go shoot bows and arrows. And then we had to go and watch them, and we made these little strings that you put around your waist with a magazine covered in cloth so that you could sit and not get your pants dirty. And I was like, this is horse shit. Yeah. I was like, this is stupid. All of us live on farms. Why are we doing this? Pretending we're going to be clean, tidy housewives. And what you said about the Mormons sweeping a lot of stuff under the rug is kind of, as I got older, what I started to realize was that these perfect, beautiful, pristine homes, that a lot of Mormonism had a lot to do with acquiring financial wealth. And that a lot of that as everything had this veneer, and everybody had to be happy and look really clean and pretty. And as I got older and my friends started to be more honest, I think every single one of my Mormon friends had an eating disorder, and there was a lot going on under the surface.
I remember a talk someone gave in church. I had just come back from. No, because I never went to church. That was right before my mission. And this guy gave a talk about how women's job was to look beautiful for her husband. Like, that's what she was supposed to do. And I was like, this is gross. Like, it never sat well with me. And I don't identify as a woman, but, like, as someone who writes for a living, the movies that I like, the stories that I identify more with are more about women. Because I feel like for women and gay men, Margaret Cho even said this, she said, for women and gay men, it's all about how you have to look a certain way or else you're worthless. And that's a big part of why I also wrote Deadweight, because, like, there's a gay character in it who's at the camp and he's not fat. But they're like, why are you here? And he's like, I'm gay. And they're like, what? And he's like, I'm gay fat.
Yeah.
And they're like, he's like, I'm trying to get down to my birth weight. Like, but, like, I think that, like, because of that, I feel like a stronger bond to stories and things about women, because a lot of those stories are about, like, overcoming shit. Like, I imprinted so hard on, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was a teenager. That came out when we were, like, 16, started like on TV, and to this day I'm still obsessed with it. And, like, the idea of, like, high school is hell, you have a secret, you can't tell anybody about it. That was just too close to,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it was just too close to home.
I will say one thing, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I do think I've often noticed that Mormons do raise gentler men than the general population. I feel like a lot of the Mormon men I grew up around and dated, and, you know, and even that I'm still friends with now. I have a few Mormon friends. They do tend to be, because the whole focus is, like, being a part of a family, being a part of a community. They do tend to just sort of make these, like, the whole machismo culture is very different for Mormons, I think. Like, I could be totally wrong because I grew up, you know, outside of it, and also a girl. So
I think you generally walk around super calm if you have never tasted a drop of coffee.
Yeah.
Like, if that's a sin to you, then sure. Like, but I think that they do sort of press this, like, quiet dignity kind of thing, you know? And yeah, when you have these when you don't drink, when you don't smoke, when you don't drink coffee, when your day is supposed to be about, like, your family and Jesus, I think there is something different, though, because I see other religions where people are very, for lack of a better word, very Jesus-y, but they're very crazy about it. And there's this, like, I don't know how else to put it other than quiet dignity is what they want from you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's a very reserved, I think of, like, this guy I dated a few years ago who was Mormon, and that's a perfect way to describe him, is quiet dignity. A very soft-spoken man, is a lawyer, is just like a very shy, very quiet. Even because we went to high school with him, when we went to school, he was silent probably for 4 years. I don't think we talked more than 10 times, which I do like a quiet man. That's true. So maybe that's why I dated so many Mormons. I like a very, very quiet, nice man. So
why not?
I mean, I just feel like, you know, I don't like I don't like any of the patriarchal stuff that they do, but they have something that they do right, which is like you said, they're not, I don't know, like a lot of religions, like, although they proselytize like constantly. So, you know, I
don't want to generalize, but I think the difference is they're not, like, yelling at their wife to bring them a beer. They're like, thank you for dinner, honey.
They're just like, if you want to get into heaven, you'll know that I like a beer at 6:30 because I have control of whether or not you come to the planet. So,
but they can't drink a beer because that's a sin.
That's true. So they'll take a smoothie.
Right.
6:30.
Yeah. A Jamba Juice.
I usually ask those two questions, and then I have my third question is always just something sort of tailored to you. And I mean, honestly, I have so many things. I can't wait to come to Portland or the next time you're in Boise and just hang out, because I feel like we have so much to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But my memory of you from high school was that here's like an interesting thing, since I have run into people from hai school. I found that my memory of myself seems to be quite different than other people's memory of me, where people are like, oh, you were so outgoing. You were so, for me, I was like, I felt like I was like, I think maybe every high school feels like I didn't fit in. I didn't have a lot of friends, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, no, that's crazy. That's not who you were. You were really funny. You were really loud. You were really outgoing. And I'm like, what? So I want to know, like, who do you think you were in high school? And who do you think maybe, like, I'll tell you after. I mean, I guess I'll wait till after. But yeah, who do you think you were? And
that's a tough question, because I think what you said is very true. And I think, not to analyze you, but I think like part of maybe what you are like caught off guard by that is that as teenagers, I think we're all sort of in our heads, like feeling like we're dealing with our own stuff. And so that might overpower like the idea that we think we might have been outgoing or whatever. But I think who I was fairly outgoing. I think I might have been seen as somebody who like at least was trying real hard. and by that I mean like I auditioned for solos. I auditioned for a musical that our school did on a dare, and then was double cast with like a senior guy because I was a sophomore who got a lead role, and then that guy didn't even come to rehearsals. So I was like, well, I'm going to show them that, you know, that I can do this. And like,
I remember that. I remember you getting cast for that and it being such a like, oh, Terry. You know?
It was so embarrassing because I didn't even show up to the first rehearsal because I wasn't in theater. I was never in theater. So nobody told me when the first rehearsal was. Nobody told me that the cast list went up. I didn't know what any of that shit was. Nobody gave me a schedule. Nobody gave me the music. So like literally in a week, I learned all that music, all my lines, because I was behind. And then I had this like, I need to show them that I'm not this fuck up. 90% of my friends were girls. That's mostly who I hung out with. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I was an outgoing person, but I definitely remember getting made fun of. And so like avoiding certain people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess that's who I was.
Those guys are all real estate agents now, just so you know.
Okay. I'll name them later for you.
Yeah. I can guess, and
you're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm very curious to hear what you think.
Well, that's, I guess, you know, you have an accurate view of yourself, because I thought you were very outgoing. I thought you were very funny. You were a lot of fun to be around. You know, I just remember you making everybody in choir, because we were both choir nerds, you know. I would just remember you making everybody laugh a lot and being easy to be around. I had gay people in my family, but it wasn't like super on my radar. So I never was like, oh, Terry's gay. I just kind of was like, man, Terry's easy to be around. You know, he's not someone who makes you uncomfortable.
Because he's Mormon. So he's calm. Yeah,
exactly.
I never thought I was funny until like a few years ago. And then I was like, I guess I am. Why not?
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because I thought you were more of a theater kid. I didn't realize you were.
So I hung out with a lot of theater kids, and I remember. So like when we went to Bora, they didn't have an auditorium, so I would always eat lunch in the theater with all the theater kids.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much who I hung out with was them.
Did you know that teacher got arrested?
No.
Yes, for being inappropriate with teenage girls. Him, the basketball teacher, the economics teacher.
The economics teacher I know about. Yeah, I knew about that one. Yeah. That's crazy.
I passed economics because I would just wear something very short every time and then ask him a lot of questions. And then also because I saw him at a party with like friends of mine who were like, 18 and 19, who are a little older than high school age. And I saw him at a party and he was chatting up somebody that I was like, oh, hey, she's not 18. And so I think that's why I passed econ.
I know about a guy that teacher chatted up.
Really?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. And that school, like later, I feel like the next few, like 5 years after that, like half the male faculty just got like, everybody they just got a paddy wagon. They came through.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, it was not great
crazy.
for that, but we survived it.
Yep, we sure did.
We sure did. Well, do you want to plug anything? Do you have anything you want to promote? You do a million things.
Sure.
So.
My 2 books are out, Deadweight and Hotel Dare. You can find them. I would suggest maybe supporting like a local comic shop that might need, some help right now. And then my new book, Eat Your Heart Out, was just announced in Publishers Weekly this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So be on the lookout, I guess. My Twitter and my Instagram are just Terry Blas. I'm very easy to find. And anytime I have like a new thing or an announcement or whatever, I post it on there.
Amazing. Well, this has been such a pleasure. I cannot wait to hang out with you and have such a good time. And you guys, this has been What's Next with Emma Arnold. And tune in next week when our guest is, I don't know, you'll have to put this in later, Alex. I can't remember who's next. So
Dave Ross.
But tune in next time. And we really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, Terry, for being here.
Thank you.
Woo.